I invite you today, if you're in a position where you can, if you're in a space where you can just stop whatever is going on and close your eyes. And as you listen to these ideas, as the words kind of go by today, I invite you to just simply observe the reaction within your field of consciousness. Just observe. In other words, instead of saying, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I like that idea," and then following your own train of thought as to why you like that idea, or that's a terrible idea. I don't agree with that at all, and here's all the reasons why I don't agree with it. All right, this is how we normally process things at the human level. But try not to do that today. Try to kind of listen with your heart. Try to observe how you feel. And if an idea comes up, if something comes to you and says, "Well, I like that," just simply say to yourself, "Well, that's an idea." And if an idea comes up to you and says, "Well, that reminds me of this," just say, "Well, that's just an idea, just an idea." So try not to become entangled in the thoughts as they go by. Just observe them. Just observe them. This is kind of an experiment that we're going to do together. So there's lots of things that are going on and coming out. And they're all pointing in the same direction, but I think that we're each going to find our way to where these ideas are pointing. We're going to find our own way. We're going to find our own way there. In the email that I sent out last night, I mentioned don't go jousting at windmills. Don't go jousting at windmills. And of course that comes from the Man of La Mancha, from Don Quixote in Cervantes' Man of La Mancha. And as I was thinking about it, I came to the realization that I don't know that I've ever fully read that novel. I may have read excerpts of it in high school. We may have analyzed it in a literature class. And of course, when you're analyzing things in literature class, somebody else is telling you what you should think about it. Well, this is what it means, and this is what that means, and this is who this character represents, and all those kind of things. So I don't know that you ever really gain your own insight. You might get some ideas to consider, but I don't know that I ever read the entire work and formed my own opinion of it. And all that comes to me when I think of that is something that I saw from probably a classics comics that I read when I was a kid. And we didn't have a library in town, and if we had to read it, we probably we probably got the classics comics and read the truncated version. And there was this cartoon frame, cartoon box, an image of a dejected Don Quixote who had been engaging in combat with the windmill, and of course he lost. He got knocked off his horse, and he was sitting there dejected, wondering why this could have happened. His cause was noble and good and right, and yet he was defeated. And that's all I really remember of it. But as I started to think about it last night, I started to think, what an amazing satire the whole image of jousting at windmills is, when we think about the way that we as human beings live our lives, the way that we live our lives. So I went on the web and I kind of did a little bit of research to see what other people had thought. Did anybody else kind of perceive this as satire, or was I the only one? And there was one man who spent many years. He spent many years translating. I don't know whether he was translating from Spanish or there was a remaining text that was in Arabic. And this man translated, and he said when he started the work of translating Cervantes, for years he read it and he was sad. He thought it was such a sad, sad story. There's this poor old delusional man who was living in a time that had passed him by, and saw, these amazing noble causes in things that weren't even there. The windmill became an enemy, and he had to do battle with it for glory and all these kind of things. And the fellow said by the time he finished translating, after he had been working on it for years, and he finished translating, he said he could barely read a sentence without laughing, without finding the humor in it. How Cervantes seemed at every point, as soon as the reader thought that they understood what was going on, Cervantes interjected something new and let the reader know you don't know what's going on. So that kind of makes me want to go and read it for myself. But what the fellow said is that we were captured in Don Quixote's quest to discover reality, right? To discover reality. What is it that is real? Are the windmills really an enemy, or are they not an enemy? Or is that what's really going on in the story, and all these kind of things? And I thought, isn't that just a perfect summation kind of life, of our life itself? Aren't we all really on a quest to try to discover what is reality? What is real? And in so doing, we allow ourselves to be distracted. We go off, and of course we're not fighting windmills because we don't have windmills. Well, some places they are. Some places they are installing windmills now. And people are fighting against them. But we allow ourselves to be distracted with so many things that don't mean anything. So many things that are not real. So we are, in many respects, like Don Quixote. We are on a quest to discover that which is real, but we have become entangled with that which is not. So I just want to leave that kind of idea right there. It's kind of like the song from Midnight Cowboy. We're looking for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for love in all the wrong places. We are looking for that which is real, but we are looking for it in the unreal. And you can never find that which is real in that which is unreal. It's not there. It is not there, Yet we keep persisting in looking for it there. We keep persisting in trying to find it there. And it is not there. So the insanity then, or the hilarity of Don Quixote engaged in his noble cause of riding on his trusty steed, which was a broken down old plow horse, to engage the mortal enemy, the windmill, thinking that he was doing good deeds. To me, this is kind of like the metaphor of our lives. We are all jousting at windmills. We are all allowing ourselves to become entangled with things that don't matter, which are not real. And somehow we think that in doing so, we are going to find that which is real. That which is real can never support that which is unreal. That which is real can never support that which is unreal. Remember this when we are seeking effective prayer. That which is real can never support that which is unreal. So if we are attempting to use prayer to support that which is unreal, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Another way of putting it is when we speak to God, we must speak to God in language that God understands. We can't be talking about things that the divine could not possibly know. I probably need to clarify that for just a moment, because when we were children growing up, we were taught that God is all-knowing. God knows everything. And we have to realize that that in itself is not entirely true. Because the divine cannot know anything unlike itself. What God knows, God is. If God knew the opposite of itself, it would cancel itself out. You know, kind of like Star Trek, when matter and antimatter meet, the universe as we know it comes to an end. So the divine cannot know anything unlike itself. And we have to come to realize that the statement that God knows everything is limited. Is limited. If you read the little booklet that I wrote kind of on these things, we use the example of the riddle of the rock. You know, one of my boyhood school chums used to drive us crazy with the things that his cousin, who was studying to be a Jesuit, would learn in the seminary. But the ultimate puzzle is, if God could do anything, could God make a rock that was so big God couldn't pick it up? And your first inclination is to say, sure, God could make a rock that big because God could do anything. And the answer is, well, then, if God can't pick up the rock, God can't do everything. So then you say, well, then no, God can't make a rock so big that God can't pick it up. And you say, well, then God can't make a rock that big. So you see, God can't do everything. And the purpose of that riddle, you know, is not to drive people crazy. It is to illustrate that our concepts, our mental images of what this thing called reality is, our very concepts itself are flawed. Our very concepts themselves need to be dissolved. So we have Don Quixote, who's out jousting at Windmills, and we can see that in some way represents each and every one of us, because we are all engaged in mental activity, not only from the time we wake until the time we go to sleep, but even after we go to sleep. We have these things called dreams. Now, I think we all realize that which occurs in our dreams is not real. It didn't happen other than somewhere inside this parade of images in our head. And you can see that we spend time in our sleep. I don't know if you've ever had a night where you're engaged in trying to solve a problem. It seems like every time you wake up in the middle of the night, you say, oh, thank goodness, that was just a dream, you know. And we fall back asleep, and we go right back to trying to solve this unsolvable problem. Whatever it may be, you know, it's just like this constant agitation sometimes we go through during the night. Maybe we're trying to find the answer to something, you know. And of course, if we were awake, we could go over to the computer and we could search the internet for it, and we would have the information that we need in just a few minutes' time. But the internet can't help us while we're dreaming. That which is real cannot support that which is unreal. Yet while we are asleep, and while we are in the dream, and while we are engaged in the struggle of that dream, it seems entirely real to us. But it is not. But it is not. Excuse me again. Now, another thing I want you to consider is there's a teaching story that we use about a group of people who used monkeys, captured monkeys and used monkeys in their society. They used them for food. And you would think, you know, how do you go about catching a monkey? You know, these things are pretty quick. You know, they can climb trees, they can swing across branches, they can scamper across the ground. How would you go about catching a monkey if your life depended upon it? But the people are pretty clever. So what they would do is they would get a gourd, and they would make a tiny opening in the shell of the gourd, just enough that the monkey could stretch its hand straight out and slide its hand and its wrist and get it in the gourd. And then they would put pieces of figs and dates and fruit and whatever monkeys like, they would put those in the gourd. And then they would fasten the gourd to something so it couldn't be carried off. And the monkeys would come along, they would smell the fruit, they would slide their hand in through the hole, they would reach down and they would get a fistful of whatever was in the gourd, and then they would try to pull their hand back out. Well, because their hand was now full of the food that they wanted, their hand was too big to come out of the hole. The only way they could get their hand out of the hole was if they would let go of the food that they had in their hand. And they wouldn't do that. They would sit there and they would struggle and they would struggle and they would struggle and they would pull and they would pull and they would pull. But they would never let go. They would never let go of what they were holding on to. And in this way, the hunters would just come along and the monkeys would be right there waiting for them. They didn't have to chase them or anything like that. So we're like that. We're like that. We all have ideas. The food in the gourd is like the ideas that we hold on to. We all hold on to many, many ideas, almost all of which are wrong, or at least they are not real in the sense of reality. And we won't let go of them. We won't let go of them. Now we say we're on this quest to discover reality. Well, like Don Quixote, we're trying to figure out what is reality. And even just the quest kind of states there's something else. There is this thing called reality. There is this something, and I have a way of determining what it is. And I want to know what it is, and I shall know what it is. So the windmills that we joust with, and the erroneous ideas that we hold on to, see, they're what holds us back. They're what holds us back. That which you struggle against and struggle with, that you are attached to. That you are attached to. Emmett Fox once wrote, he says, you can't put anybody in prison unless you're willing to go sit there with them and guard them, right? Or pay somebody to do it. But this whole idea then is that we are stuck. We are stuck by our erroneous thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. This is what Buddhism tells us. This is karma. Everything we experience is a result of our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. We suffer because of erroneous thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. So we have all of these ideas. We have all of these ideas that are inside the gourd of our ego. Our ego is the shell that contains all of these ideas. We have this idea about who I am. We have this idea about who everybody else is. I'm going for another drink of water here. We have all of these ideas about the way things are and the way things ought to be. We have all of these shoulds all over the place, and we hold on to them. We become very, very attached to them. And it is because we hold on to them, because we are attached to them, that we are stuck. We are stuck in the dream. So the big thing that we want to consider, or the main point I hope that we can consider as we go through this day, and I hope I hope that you're still listening with your heart and feeling. Just feel the response. Feel what comes up. When an idea comes up, say, oh, that's just an idea. That's just an idea. It's just an idea. So what has happened is, as we've been talking for the last several weeks, what has happened is there is this idea of separation. There is this idea, and that's all it is an idea. And it is an unreal idea. It is a false idea of separation. There is an I that is separate from everything else. It is separate from that which has created it. It is separate from other expressions of that which has created everyone. And the ego forms and it reinforces this idea of separation. We have this idea of I and this idea of I am, and I am this and I am not that. And this is the way it is, and this is the way it ought to be, and this is the way it should be. And this idea in itself is an illusion. It is wrong. It is like the windmill that has become the enemy. Obviously, it would take you like 2 seconds to use. I read a beautiful line the other day. I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but we use reason. We use reason to correct the errors of our senses. So we see something we think it is, and then we think about it and we say it can't be that. It can't be that. So we use logic and reason to try to overcome that. So the ego says we're separate from life itself. And yet we cannot breathe without the trees. The very water that we drink comes from the ocean. So the ego has this sense of self that is an incorrect sense of self. So we'll call it the self with a little s. And the ego has all of these different ideas about the way things are and the way things ought to be and the way things should be and who I am and where I'm going and all these things. And they are based on that which is unreal. They are based on separation. An erroneous belief in separation. But that doesn't stop. That doesn't stop the ego from keeping the illusion going. It's like we've manufactured this tremendous story about who we are and what life is and the way things ought to be. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to defend that story against everything that is unlike it. You know, you're seeing it kind of playing out to the hilt now that we have social media and instant communications around the world. And it's what you do. If you don't like what you see, it's fake news. It's just fake news. Nope, that's not true. Nope, that didn't happen. You see something with your eyes, and then somebody tells you, well, you didn't see that. What you think you saw, you didn't see. It's something else going on there. And so the question then of what is reality, what is real, is playing out for us before our very eyes. It's playing out for us in the TV shows that we watch. It's playing out for us in the news. Right? We used to have scripted dramas on TV, and then we went to reality TV shows which were supposed to be unscripted. And of course, you know, there's production assistants who coach each of the cast members and tells them, well, you know, it would really be cool if this happened this week. So you're kind of looking at almost an improv where the actors are playing the roles of characters, but nobody's telling me exactly what to say, but they're telling them that it probably ought to go in this direction. So what has happened is we are watching before our very eyes. We are watching the epitome of the unreality of modern life play out before our lives. Many years ago, Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message, and I know a lot of people have different takeaways from that, but to me, that what it means is that whatever a particular medium is good at communicating, that becomes the message that gets communicated over that medium over and over. So, for example, radio is perfect medium for rhetoric, and when you listen to radio during the day, most of what you get is talk radio with people just talking on for hours and hours and hours, just droning on opinion after opinion after opinion. But that's what radio is good for, and that's become the predominant message that comes across it. So what everything that we're seeing now, instead of seeing something that you could look at and say, well, that's real, you are seeing an image. You are seeing an image, an illusion. When we go to the TV studio and we're setting up to direct a show at the TV studio, we walk into the room and it's pitch black. There's nothing in there. It's completely bare. And we send people down to the prop room, and they come out and they bring out trees and they bring out rugs and they bring out furniture and they bring out lamps and they bring out all of these different things, and they build a set, and everything is lit so it will look a certain way, and then the cameras are put into position, and then the talent is brought onto the set and their wardrobe is examined. Everything that appears on that screen, right? The director is back in the control room deciding which camera shots to use and telling the camera people, push in, push out, move left, move right. Everything that appears on that screen is an illusion, And as soon as we're done with the show, we strike the set, we put the cameras back in position, we turn out the lights, and it goes back into being a black room. None of that was real. At best, we created a 2D rendition of a 3D world. But by intention, everything that we put on that screen was there to convey a message. It was all contrived. It is all deliberate. It is all manufactured. So what we want to consider today is that as we look at what's going on, because social media is so powerful, it is so quick. I guess a tweet can go around the world in a few seconds. What we are seeing is the ego consciousness of society trying to maintain the illusion that what it believes to be real is real. It is trying to discredit everything that is unlike itself. That's not true. Don't pay any attention to that. And it is trying to reinforce its own message, its own image. I'm not picking on any politicians in particular. This is true of society in general. It's true of each and every one of us. We have a story. We have a story in our head, and that story is nothing more than a collection of ideas, but the problem is we believe it to be true. We believe our story is true. And we do everything we can to defend our story. And the interesting thing is, if you go around and ask other people their opinion of a person, and then ask that person their opinion of themselves, you're going to get vastly different views, right? So as individuals, we think that we're kind of the center of the universe. But not everybody sees us that way, because they think that they are the center of the universe. So what we want to remember is this. As long as we are stuck in the dream, as long as we are trying to pretend that the dream is real, as long as we are trying to distort and to manipulate and to ignore certain things and to amplify other things, as long as we are trying to do this in our own lives in order to convince ourselves that our story is real, we will not know reality. We will only know our story. We are stuck in the dream, which is not real. And the consequences of that are that we can't live an authentic life while we are doing that. Right? I think the search for the authentic self, the search for reality, moving from the unreal to the real, all of these phrases are kind of describing our quest of what it is that we are seeking. But we can't get to reality by trying to convince ourselves that the unreal is real. So what happens is we create these illusions, we create these dreams, we create these fantasy worlds that we live in, where we tend to ignore that which is real and try to reinforce that which is unreal. Our relationships become sort of romantic fantasies, where as long as we're in this relationship, you know, the world, it's kind of like, what was it, the movie, Priscilla Presley and Leslie Nielsen, and Naked Gun, 33 and a half or something like that. But they fell in love, and everything goes into slow motion, and for just like a 2 or 3 minute sequence that goes across the screen, they do all of these things that would take like a week and a half to do. They go to different movies, they go to the beach, they go on picnics. They do all of these different things, you know. Impossible to do in real time. But our relationships become like that. As long as we're in this relationship, we can distract ourselves then from discovering what reality is. As long as we are in this career, we can dedicate ourselves to our career, and we can distract ourselves from discovering what reality is. And at some point in our growth, at some point in our spiritual growth, if we are ever in this lifetime, if we are ever to make that breakthrough, we have to be willing to let go of that which is not real. We have to be willing to recognize that our ideas are nothing more than ideas. And they are no better or worse than anybody else's ideas, but they are just ideas. And ideas are not reality. Our ideas are just ideas. We have to come and recognize then that these things that we have been holding on to, our way of life, our values, all of these things that are important to us, that they are also ideas. And it may be time to let go of them. And then the biggest awakening of all is this idea of the ego, of who I am, of what I am, why I'm here, where I'm going. Anything that has to do with apartness and separation, that it's just an idea. It's just an idea. So I'll give you a little experiment. And here's the setup to it. In answering this question, I don't want you to bring in anything from the past or anything from the future. In the now, in the here, only now, who are you? See, we would normally say, well, I am, and we would give a name. That's a name that somebody gave you in the past. We might answer and say, well, I work here. No, not this moment. in this moment. Who are you? And you are not your work. Your work is something that you do. Who are you? And the point of the exercise is it shows us very clearly, again, excuse me while I get a drink, it shows us very clearly that that which we think we know is only an idea, is only an idea. And that idea is based on that which is not real. So what we want to do as we grow spiritually is we have to be willing to let go. This is why different spiritual teachings talk about the dissolution of the ego. And the problem that we have with that is the ego is terrified of that idea. If you've ever tried to learn meditation and found out that every time you sit down and meditate, you have a tremendous aversion to it, something comes up, oh, did I turn the stove off? Or, I need to do this, I need to do that. Consider that it might be your ego fighting back against what it considers will be annihilation. Oh my goodness. If I let them meditate, I'll be dead. I'm going to kick up a fuss. And that is not true at all. That is not true. That may be the ego's perception, but remember the ego is coming from the erroneous idea of separation, the human ego, little s, the little self. And what we must come to identify with is the cosmic self, the capital S, which can never be annihilated. We have to switch our sense of identification. We have to let go of that gourd, the ego, the shell that has been holding us back, where we are attached to the erroneous ideas that we're holding on to, and we just got to let go of all of them. Excuse me. We have to let go of all of it. Now, jousting at Windmills, it keeps us in the dream. It keeps us in the illusion. It makes us feel like we're doing something. One of the things in the ego world is, did you do everything you possibly could? Did you give it everything that you had? And people get involved in all kinds of things that, in the long term, mean nothing. I think it's in Paul in the New Testament. It says, what does it mean if you've got the whole world and you haven't discovered your soul? What good is all of that? What good of all the things that we get caught up in and we get excited about and we struggle with, right? When the goal is to discover that which is already there. So the ego will tell us, I have to strive for my spiritual growth. I've got to work hard for my spiritual growth. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And that in itself is a windmill to joust at. It is something that the ego is giving us to do that will keep us from succeeding. It will preserve itself because it is afraid of annihilation. So here's the simplicity of the whole thing. That which is real is already here. Just as in the opening treatment, I said the sun is still shining at night. The sun is still shining on a cloudy day. That which is real is already here. We do not and cannot struggle to bring that which is already here. Struggling may make us feel alive, right? So a lot of what the ego does is it tries to make us feel alive. And struggling makes us feel alive. But we are already alive. We have to realize that we're already alive. We have to experience our aliveness. We don't have to do anything to be alive. We are alive. So we don't have to struggle for our spiritual growth. We don't have to fight demons for our spiritual growth. We don't have to do difficult physical tasks to the body. What we have to do is we have to let go. See, the instant we stop believing in the reality of the unreal, that which is real appears. So this is why Emmett Fox says our growth is not a matter of plussing. We don't have to add anything to ourselves. It's a matter of minusing. It's not about obtaining God, possessing God. It's not about bringing God to the human level and getting God to do our bidding. There's something in the Upanishads that says, if you think you've achieved God, you haven't. If you think you know, you don't. God is not a prize to be won. Is not an accomplishment to achieve. God already is. And God is to be experienced. So I'm going to give two ideas. One of them I actually kicked off with. I'm going to give you two ideas to just simply find time to practice. The last question I'll ask you before I get into that is, if you look back on the last 24 hours, just in your mind, in your mental scorebook, out of that last 24 hours, how many hours did you spend determining what was real? And I think if you're like most of us, the answer is probably none. We were caught up in life, we were caught up in activity, we were caught up in our thoughts, we fell asleep, we were caught up in our dreams. And if the quest that we're on is the quest to determine that which is real, then we're going to have to dedicate some time to it, to our spiritual practice, to our meditation, to our prayer, just simply being. So the first technique is the one that I opened with. Just sit. Don't have to assume any particular position. You don't have to breathe any certain way. Just sit. Just sit and become aware of what is crossing the field of your consciousness. And just recognize, oh look, there's an idea. That's it. Oh look, there's an idea. And when it leaves, where did it go? There goes an idea. That's it. There goes an idea. Oh, here's another idea. And as you do that, you'll be aware that there's a gap in between the ideas. And what you want to do is you want to just observe what's in the gap. Because what's in the gap, is going to be that which is real. That which is real. So it's like we're trying to determine what's real, but we got the TV on and it's playing all these dramas and all this news and all this stuff that's going on here. And if we can turn it off for just a second and be still, then we can experience that which is already here. So just observe thought and be with the gap. That's one meditation technique that the Buddha taught. Just observe the thought and be with it. Don't get caught up in the thought. Don't argue with the thought. Don't joust that windmill. Don't struggle. Don't strain. Don't correct it. Don't argue with it. Don't agree with it. Just observe it. Observe it. And then the other technique may take a little longer to practice. And that's don't think. Feel. Don't think. Feel. So all of the information that we have, like from our senses, comes in and it goes into what the Upanishads would call manas, M-A-N-A-S. It's perception. And it's just there. See? And it doesn't mean anything. It's just there. So yesterday I took lots of pictures of the kids. But suppose I just take that picture and I don't do anything with it. I never show it to anybody. I just leave the file onto my computer. 100 years from now, somebody opens up that file and looks at it. When they look at it, then they start to assign values to it. They start to process it. Oh, look, this means this. Oh, look, that means that. But until that analytical process starts happening, till these other values get added, it's nothing but zeros and ones in a digital file. So if I show you a flower, you immediately start to think, well, is it a rose or is it a tulip? Does it smell sweet or does it smell bitter? Does it have thorns? Or if you're in business, you might say, is there a market for them? Could I raise these? Could I sell them? And all of this is the activity of the ego consciousness. And what we want to do is just practice being and feeling that rose. If a thought about the rose comes up, we say, oh, look, there's an idea. That's it. Can you feel? Can you feel? If I ask you if you love your significant other, or your family, or your pet, you might immediately tell me, well, yes, and then give me all the reasons why. That's in your head. Those are ideas. What is the feeling of love? Without the value added, without all of the other ideas, without all of the activity of the mind. So I want you to just kind of be with this, just feel this. We are all Don Quixote. We are all jousting at windmills, and we do so because it keeps us distracted from the real task at hand, which is letting go of the unreal. We don't have to discover the real. We don't have to capture the real. We don't have to struggle for the real. We have to let go of the unreal. And in order to do so, we have to stop participating in it. We have to let go of the false belief that I am separate from, different than, that I must analyze and weigh and form an opinion on each and everything. And then I must defend my opinion as the right opinion, and I must attack all other opinions as the wrong opinions. And all of those are just ideas that are unreal and keep us stuck in the dream. Take some time this week and just be. Just be. Don't think about it. Just be it. When we stop engaging with the unreal, that which always was and always will be becomes obvious. And so it is.